So let's just start and dive straight into this. Alien Isolation. We were recommended this game to play by the community for the longest time. We had it downloaded on the PlayStation Store for about £10. It was on sale months ago. We picked it up really cheap. I had a mixed experience with this game in the beginning. The first day I played for about 6 hours and I didn't have that great of a time. I feel like I wasn't having that good of a time and I was miserable playing it. I got constantly lost. I got constantly frustrated, not at dying to the alien, and I didn't feel fear about getting caught by the androids and dying all the time. The frustration came from my misunderstanding of what to do, where to go, how to interact with things, what was available, what I needed to do in order to progress. And then coupled with the save mechanic in this game, when I died, I would then be reset back, 20 minutes had I not found an appropriate save machine. That being said, so we're doing a 180 here. By the end of day 2 and the end of day 3, which we've just finished, which was a very short day of playing, about 2 hours, I really, really enjoyed this game. And I'm going to explain everything about that. I'm going to explain why it was so good. I'm going to explain a couple of things that I think they could have done better. And I'm going to explain why there's probably such a kind of a mixed opinion about this game. So let's get into it. Alien Isolation, it is good, but you need to understand some things getting into it. We played on hard mode, so I'll outline that now. The reason we picked hard mode is because when you boot up the game, it recommends that you play on hard mode. I'll show you that right now, just for the sake of doing so, because my chat trolled me the entire game, saying, Jack, why are you playing on hard mode? When you start a new game, if you actually hover over hard, it says the recommended way to experience this game, challenging and terrifying. So there's a couple of things you have to know, and a couple of tips to people who might be watching this and they are not enjoying the game, okay? There's a couple of things that you need to figure out early on that will make your life so much better. So first of all, you need to learn to use your tracking device, your radar sequence, to find out where to go next. This is something I completely had no idea about. I missed the prompt in-game in day 1. If you hold R1, it brings up the radar. It shows you where the alien is, but most importantly, it shows you where to go. It's very, very good. The GPS system is very clear for the most part, most of the time in this game. It's not always perfect, and there are sequences when your GPS will not work, and you won't have any indication of where to go, what to interact with, what to do, and you have to figure out for yourself. So, figure out how to do that early. Secondly, you need to learn to make some of the tools in the game. It might be easy at first to just ignore it, but making your noise makers, and things like your EMP devices, make sure that I didn't use certain things in the game. I didn't use flares, and I didn't use smoke grenades, flashbangs. I ignored all that, but I think on a second playthrough these might come in handy. So make sure you're using your gadgets and your gizmos. Make sure that when you're picking up loot, if you can't pick up the loot because it's full, start putting the components into things to build them in the future. Medkits are most important, I feel, and then after that, making all your other bits and bobs, your Molotovs, I guess, are pretty good. So make your stuff, follow your radar, you're going to have a really good time with this game. Another thing to point out is that when you're moving around inside the space station, people told me that I didn't have to crouch walk everywhere, but I found that by the end of the game, I was fully convinced, and I could be, again, persuaded if he showed me evidence. I could be persuaded otherwise, but I insist that when you guys are playing, you can crouch walk everywhere, and the game goes a lot more successful for you. Now, you don't have to crouch walk in areas where you know the alien's not going to kill you, but crouch walking, I found that towards the later parts of the game, even when you don't think that you need to crouch walk, I know I'm being controversial, but it does actually stop the alien from spawning as much. People say that when you walk, it doesn't make any noise, but I found that when I was walking, the alien would catch up to me very quickly, and it would attack me a lot more frequently than when I'm crouch walking. If you kind of play this game slow, I feel like it rewards you a little bit more. If you've not got the patience for that, fine. If you're a good enough player that you don't have to crouch walk and you're really agile with the alien and whatnot, then that's fine. But I found that personally, crouch walking actually helps a lot more. There's a lot less alien interaction, and you can also avoid a lot of the humans and androids better that way. There's a couple of things that are really good about the game. I'm going to talk about those and then talk about the negative things later, because I have a feeling this is going to be longer than anticipated. So things to do well in this game: the sound is a really, really top tier. The graphics for the game is pretty good, and also the immersion in general, just the lore of the Alien franchise is pretty nice. They tie it in very well. You've got Sigourney Weaver doing the initial voices of Ripley and stuff in the beginning, and having Amanda Ripley, Ripley's daughter, is a nice connection to the series. So they do all that really well. There's a decent amount of content in the game also, so if you are looking to get your money's worth, if you can get this game on sale for like a tenner and you really like the Alien franchise, if you like horror games in general, It takes a while to get into it, and there's a lot of trial by fire. You're going to die a lot, and it's going to frustrate the shit out of you. You might even get lost from time to time. I totally see all that happening. But if you can get over it, when you actually learn how the game works, it's really, really good, at least in my opinion. Again, I didn't enjoy it in day one, but there's a lot of things to learn. On the flip side of that, there are a lot of things that make it miserable in the beginning as a new player. There's a lot of trial by death, which is, you do a lot of learning via death, which I find in video games can be a bit frustrating. So when you run down a corridor for the first time, the alien's going to spawn behind you, it's probably going to fall out of a vent, and it's going to kill you, and that sucks. You're then going to learn to, move a bit slower, move a bit quieter. Sometimes in the early stages of the game, you're going to be, having not saved in a long time, you're going to walk under a vent, there's going to be drool coming out of it, you might not see it, as I didn't even fucking notice it, dude. I thought at first the drool coming out of the vent, I literally thought it was like a burst pipe and there was water leaking from the ceiling. The alien killed me, it one-shots you. There's a couple of things like that as a viewer it's maybe funny to watch the streamer die to, or even watch your mates if you're watching in someone's living room die to this. It's quite funny, but as a player it feels kind of gimmicky and cheap. There's a lot of things that you will die to in the beginning, just going the wrong way, walking into a dead end, not making enough resources, or not knowing where to go sometimes can kill you, and as a player that gets quite frustrating. The save system in the game is quite good, and I like the way that they've done the save system, because there is constantly tension. If you don't get to the save machine, there is no autosave, so if you don't save, you could potentially lose a lot of game time. So there's threat when you're playing, which is great. I like that they've done that. But in the beginning, the save machines are quite hard to identify, as are the maps. Once you learn that the maps are these giant luminous white, kind of beige kind of squares that you pick up, it really does make the game better. But in the beginning, if you miss the prompt that says, these are the maps, make sure you pick them up at all times, you're going to feel a little bit lost. And I can see a lot of players getting frustrated, as I was in the beginning. Luckily, I had the chat to help me out, but that's an issue. Make sure you pick up the maps as another tip for kind of new players, because if not, you're going to be absolutely clueless on where to go. Again, back to the point of the save machine. If you know in the later aspects of the game, save as much as possible. Make sure you log your progress. I was doing it as much as I could towards the end, and it made a huge difference. I had less deaths because I was getting better. I knew how the game worked. I was getting better at using the tools. I was getting more adequate at understanding the alien's movements and how the AI kind of works. So I had less deaths overall, but in the beginning you want to save as much as possible. Try and keep an eye out for the save machines. They're these giant squares on the wall and they glow green, so use that as much as you can, otherwise it's going to get frustrating to replay segments over and over. The alien AI, we can talk about this because on one hand it's genius and it's been very well respected by online sources. I can only give you guys my own thoughts having played it for 3 days. I didn't do any research about this game beforehand. I didn't really look it up during the playthrough to figure out and see what other people were saying about it. I'm just going to give you guys my thoughts. So sometimes when you're playing against the alien, you feel amazing, right? Sometimes when you're creeping around, this may differ with difficulties, by the way. Again, we played normal. It might not be the same for you guys on like easier difficulties, and it's probably a lot worse on Nightmare. But I found that when you are in your element, creeping about, and you know what you're doing, and the alien spawns and it's following you and you're moving around it and everything's going well, let's say you get through a segment of gameplay for about 30-40 minutes and you don't die, the game feels really fucking good. It feels magical to play. So the AI is pretty clever. The alien learns about where to look for you. It learns, it overcomes like some of your later abilities in the game to prevent it from attacking you, like the flamethrower. I think it becomes a little bit resistant. Apparently there's two AI that communicate with each other. You can look it up yourself. The AI is pretty good and it's pretty clever, and it feels for the most part that it's pretty satisfying. You can kind of cheese the alien sometimes. If there's the alien on one side of a coffee table and you're on the other and you're crouched, you can kind of just move around the coffee table and circle the alien until it goes away. And when it goes up the vent, that was my time to pull the trigger and move as a player. You can kind of cheese it. It's not genius, complete genius, but that you can see the alien getting faster and getting smarter. I think if you rely on using the radar sequence, I've heard that the alien stands still and it doesn't move. I've seen it doing that in my gameplay, although it didn't do it too much. So the alien is quite clever. On the flip side of that, though, it's not total perfection. There were times where I felt like I was outplaying the shit out of the alien, and the game would kind of gimp me a little bit by just spawning the alien in front of me anyway. There's two things I want to talk about here. So, for example, let's say that there's an alien. Let's say Steve, the alien, lands in front of me. We named him Steve. Let's say you're in a room and the alien drops out of a vent. If you kind of creep around and you're hiding and you're dodging, the alien kind of walks around for 5 minutes and then it goes back up the vent. You can hear it trudging off in the left. Let's say that we're going north you can hear it going south, so you think this is great. You run north, you creep walk north, and you can hear it getting further and further away. Sometimes you can then turn the corner and then the alien will drop down a vent in front of you, and it makes no sense as to why the alien would be close to you. I kind of compared it to Resident Evil 2, the remaster that came out a few years ago. When you're running away from Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, again, difficulty dependent, it feels fair. If you're quiet, sometimes Mr. X will literally go away and you get 5, 10, 15 minutes peace to play as Leon or Claire, right? In this game, sometimes when the alien goes away, you think to yourself, okay, I'm good to go, and then the game, you know the game spawns it. It doesn't move through the vents towards you. You know the game's warping it to you, and then it'll drop in front of you and you think, come on, dude. Sometimes you will be following the alien, and it will stop and it will literally 180 and walk backwards towards you. Now, on one hand, it's good that the alien's unpredictable, but sometimes it does feel like the alien is cheating a little bit. If you are in an area and the alien walks away, it will be in a room that you're not in. It will scout that room in about 5 seconds and it will leave. But if it comes to your room that you're in, it will stay there for a good 1-2 minutes. So there's a bit of cheese there. It must be hard to balance something like this because they must really want to make an alien that is threatening and engaging with the player while also not being like completely stupid. So it must be really hard to design this, but sometimes as a player I felt kind of cheesed by the alien. I felt a bit kind of cheated. Sometimes it does silly things that you just know it wouldn't do if you weren't in the room. So it could be that the alien was just learning and getting better as the game went on, but sometimes it feels a little bit frustrating. It's good and it's bad. It's got moments of brilliance and it's got moments of like, oh come on dude, get off my fucking back. So there's that. So I'll finish talking about that stuff. Let's talk about the storyline very briefly. Everything you do in the space station is pretty exciting. Again, there's a good amount of length in the game. I found that towards the end of the game, there was a couple of silly moments where the game would make me kind of do repetitive or long-winded things. You get these little mini-games that at first are pretty nice. You know when you engage with the terminals? It's pretty cool to do the little gimmicky security passcode sequences when you're trying to beat it, especially if the alien's floating around behind you somewhere and you're terrified to get through the door you're trying to get through as quickly as possible. That can be cool at first, but then they make you do a lot of that towards the last kind of 75% of the game, or sorry, the last 25% of the game. You find yourself doing these kind of mini games over and over, and it gets a bit kind of like, oh dude, again, please. There's a segment where they make you walk all the way out as an astronaut to the space station, which is a lovely set-piece, cinematic, immersive moment for the player because you're in space, you get the suit on, there's things flying about. It's a really well-made part, but what you're doing in that area is a bit misguided and it's a bit long-winded and unnecessary. I feel like some of these segments towards the end were literally just stretched out to make the game a little bit longer by a couple of hours, and it feels a bit kind of unnecessary. You walk out at like turtle pace all the way out to the space station, you push a few buttons, there's no threat there, you can't die, and then they make you walk all the way back. Sequences like that are pretty cool, especially if you're a hardcore fan. It's quite nice to see, but it's a bit unnecessary and long-winded, especially when you're getting to the later parts of the game, you know? If one thing I kept saying is, if you as a player are getting to that part and you've invested enough time, I feel like the game should be rewarding you by giving you more fulfilling story and more exciting kind of new things to do, rather than making you, you know, trudge back and forward. It feels a bit miserable sometimes. There were some pacing problems as well, again, that kind of tie into this discussion of kind of stretching the game out a little bit. There's just some really epic things that happen in the later aspects of this game. Without spoiling too much, there's literally a situation where you have to go down to an alien nest, which is very, very, you know, tense and crazy and really spooky, and when you get out of it you feel amazing. When you come out of that area you go up to the top and there's like this giant pulsing generator system that is connected to the nest. There's a battle with all these androids that come out. It feels very exciting and it gets you going and you feel like you're in the later aspects of the game. You then go from there to another part of the space station where there is one of your colleagues, or this trapped prisoner Marlowe. He's trying to blow up the space station, so there's this like hyper crazy reactor sequence where everything's going mental and, you know, you really feel like, oh my god, this is great. And then after that, then the game will take a U-turn and then make you creep back. It'll make you creep past gun enemies again, which you've done countless times in the playthrough already. So I felt like there was a lot of these kind of ending segments that were really good, and then it would then contrast that immediately after by making you go back and doing like more puzzles at doors and more kind of mini games at computers, and it just felt like maybe if you're playing in little chunks, let's say you play for 3 hours one day, and then 2 hours one day, and then half an hour the next day, and then 4 hours on Saturday. It might not seem as much of a problem, but for me, it felt like some of the later aspects were a bit kind of unnecessarily added in as like extra segments, and I wasn't really bothered about that shit. I feel like when they're making this game, one thing I'm going to point out is sometimes I feel like they could give you a little bit more indication on where to go and what to do. There's a couple of quality of life things I think they could have put in the game that would have made things just a little bit easier, while also not taking away from this kind of evil horror simulation survival game that they've created. So what I'm trying to say is, when you interact with computers, when you find a key card, when you're looking for a button to push on the wall, what happens is, because of the nature of the game, when you approach a cabinet, let's say, and there's a key card on it, the key card won't light up until you are very, very close to it. So on one hand, the reason that they're doing this is because they want you to, as Ripley would be in that situation, she's disorientated, she doesn't really know where she's going or what she's doing. She has to hunt around in a stressful situation and find things to help her progress. Now, on one hand, that's exactly what they want you to feel as the player. But for me, sometimes it felt a little bit too annoying to be immersive, if that makes sense. This is going to depend on player patience and personality, but I feel like, for me, although I want to feel the stress that Ripley's feeling, I have to remember, without being too self-indulgent, that this is a video game, right? If I am looking for a key card, I don't want to have to look on every fucking surface inside a huge laboratory for the right card. Now, Alien Isolation, to summarise this waffle that I've hit you with, is a very good game. It's better in the second half when you've learned it. If you're someone who picks up video games and you're paying attention fully to everything the game tells you about in terms of tips in the beginning, it might be really great from the beginning. It might be great from the start, but I was frustrated. If other people came to me and said, I was really frustrated playing this game, I was bored, I didn't know where to go, I would totally understand where they're coming from. I feel like the game could do, again, in the beginning, give a little bit of extra hints and tips on how to use things properly, and then players won't be as confused, and the game would have been maybe received a little bit better. Once you get over that, once you learn it, once you maybe look up how things work properly, or review some footage on YouTube or something of someone going through the beginning of the game again, it becomes really, really fantastic. They've nailed the sound in this game. The AI is pretty funny, although it can be cheesed and it is a bit gimmicky at times, especially in hard mode. And the game can feel a little bit longer than it needs to be in certain segments. But for the most part, it's a pretty good game, a really good horror, and if you haven't played it, you should maybe consider checking it out, because it's fairly cheap at this point, and why not, right? It's October and stuff. But that's me. I'm going to upload this, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts.